all started. If you want to come look, this is my broomcorn knife. Did you bring yours?
I was going to and I forgot. Mine's a lot newer. This one's been used. Do you have the little bitty stone?
I got one, but I didn't bring it out.
Oh, yeah, they had. You carried a little stone.
That's really cool.
You carried a little stone in your pocket. First, you taped. Well, we need to have him telling it.
Well, the bad thing about it, he doesn't remember too much. He said that he didn't.
So you tape your thumb up real good.
Yeah.
With friction tape, right?
That was the first head this morning. You had this down here.
We used white tape. A lot of people use black plastic tape, and you'd have to get this really sharp or it frustrated you. And you'd kept this little tiny whetstone in your pocket, and then you pulled it out ever so often and would put an edge back on it, and then you just cut it and gather it, saddle. You're going to saddle it and all that stuff today. Ralph Bowl worked at, my brother-in-law worked at Haney Broomcorn Ranch, and so he had a whole box of these knives when it all ended. And for a wedding gift, he carved my wife's name and gave it to us. Oh yeah, he saw. Yeah, that's how that one. That's where it came from. Yeah, so this was a broomcorn knife, real light, made this specifically. I mean, it's not much. I mean, it's really a good paring knife. The steel is soft. It's not hard, so you can get an edge on it really quick. And then if you're just cutting broomcorn, it'll last a little longer, but it doesn't last long. That's why you have to keep a stone in your pocket.
First knives they used to start with, they had the wide blade, didn't they?
Well, they had a lot of times I think they had a blade that was just a little curved on the end, maybe. Just not like a cleaning knife, but it had a curve on the end. But all I ever remember were those kind. But you may remember a different one.
A curved one? I think I've seen.
The wide short blade.
Kind of like a carpet knife.
And it was, I'd say an inch and a half wide and probably an inch and a half long. I've got one, but I couldn't find it last night.
For those of you, for me, we quit growing broomcorn when I was 10, basically. And so I have a lot of memories.
Mid-60s.
The first big mishap I had before I ever started to school, I was driving a D John Deere with a broomcorn sled. Dad had me driving the broomcorn sled through. And I was driving and I went to turn at the end of the field and we had a blow hump and I turned up and I turned too sharp and run the runner into the back wheel of the tractor and blew the tractor tire out. I was 4 or 5. And my dad wasn't happy with me, but there wasn't much he could. I can remember just standing there all frustrated, but he couldn't chew out a 4-year-old. So that's the only time I ever got by was doing something wrong.
Alrighty, you want to take this knife and get started?
Mine broke.
Oh, there's your stone, yeah. Man, it's wore thin, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty well been used.
I should have brought mine. I don't know why I didn't. How old are you, Art?
97.
97.
Cut her pretty long and we'll trim it off.
They cut that through right here, and you're supposed to leave this flag leaf on the stem, right?
I don't know. You know more about. I was too little.
I'd say yes.
Well, they always told me out there that, and I ain't got enough. I don't think I can do it. That's the wrong way to cut, but I can't. I just can't do it. I just my shoulders and whoa. See, that flag leaf should have come off and stayed right up there. They always had a little. I don't know how they did it.
That always stayed on, huh?
And that flag leaf stayed on there.
So we were supposed to cut it so that stayed on.
Just hanging down, just a little bit of it.
So was this normally about how much stock they left? Or was it up higher?
Oh, they would leave at least 6 inches.
They would have
I talked to him.
About 6 inches.
So if we cut this...
Now saddling, what are you talking about on saddling, Steve?
Saddling is where you break... Well, we'll do it when we're done, when you get all this cut. So what I wondered, Art, was when it's this tall, you can't go along and break it all over. Did they put it in their arm and walk down when it was tall and then cut it like this? Is that what they did?
Either that or you walked straddle of that row.
Oh, just straddle the whole thing. But
Straddle it.
they didn't go along and break all these over on standard. What I remember was they just put it under their arm and just walked down the row, cutting
Yeah.
it like this.
Yeah.
Where to hit it and boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, and then move on. So then did the knife always go away from them, or did they pull it,
I think cut it to you like that.
cut it to you, and then you'd grab it? See, there we're gonna leave the leaf on, but we got the stem a little short.
Yeah.
That's
think
cane anyhow.
It is.
That's
yeah.
not broomcorn,
Well, it's kind of broomcorn. It's got a little bit.
but
It's a cross.
it's not like that.
It's not good broomcorn by any
So
means.
here's that leaf. So if we cut right there, we leave the leaf. Do we have 6 inches on that one? Or did you try to leave this host? Did you try to leave all that leaf on, or did you
No, all that leaf.
try to get that completely off? Man, that'd be hard to do on every one. See, I'm too young. I didn't ever get in on cutting it. I just got in on picking it up afterwards and putting it in a rick. So if you were doing this, what would you do, Art? Like right here or down low?
Yeah, right there somewhere. See, that hasn't come out of that boot. I don't know why.
It needs to be riper, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going on vacation, so today was the last
I was going to
chance.
say, I think that's what our deal is, Art. It needs to be a little riper.
Yeah, I think so.
But do you want to cut this, or?
Yeah, I can cut some. Kids can cut some if they want.
Okay.
Some?
So like he was saying, to explain this really quick, this is standard.
I
And
watched
like
her
back in Illinois,
sharp.
gosh, this stuff gets 12 feet tall or so. What we raised here was what they called dwarf. And it was only about this tall, Art, the dwarf. Yeah. And so you just reached up. You didn't have to straddle it like he was talking about or put it underneath your arm. You could just walk down, and everybody pretty much grew that by the time I was a kid. You just walked along the row. You picked a row. Did you pick a row and cut both sides?
Just one row, I think.
Just one row, and you went
I
all the way
remember
through.
Matt Locke telling me that him and Dale Villers, or Dale Burrows, cut broomcorn for Don Phillips over at Cricket, and that they could take 2 rows at a time.
It depended on what.
But it was kind of burned up, he said.
And then there got to be competition, where you were competing with a guy, and if you got a row where it was real thick and the other one was kind of thin, you got screwed on that
Yeah.
deal. So they'd do that to make it fun and enjoyable.
Yeah, and they got paid by the row.
Yeah, and then there'd be water sitting at the end or stuff, and then but the real work was done by who, Judy? Do you know? The woman back cooking the meals.
Oh,
Yeah, cooking.
That's
for
where the real work was. That
100.
That's
crazy.
a lot of people.
The guy was only as successful as his wife was back cooking meals for him, and if she didn't do a very good job, he couldn't keep broomcorn hands. One time we had it written on a building was, and my grandpa had wrote, Jake showed up Saturday night for supper, ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Sunday. Breakfast Monday, we went to the field and we couldn't find him. He'd got a free weekend of food and never did a lick of work. So you were cooking for like 20, 30 men. And it was a lot of work. And the broomcorn Johnnies come from Missouri, farmers from Missouri, Indians from Oklahoma, winos from Denver. They'd come down and work for 3 or 4 months, make a lot of money, and go back to Denver. And
Next.
They would, to start with, whether it was just the winos and the Spanish people, Mexicans hadn't come up here, they would, Sid and Glenn would make the run to the jail to see who they could bail out of jail to help them.
Because every
got lots of
Saturday afternoon,
guys,
we go to
listen.
town.
Yeah, well, the town, most people, when I was little, like I've told you guys, we didn't come to town till Saturday. That's the only time we went to town. Probably the only time you took a bath, because we didn't have a bathroom. It was all outside in the steel tub. And so you come to town on Saturday night, and Dad would drive by the jail, just like you said, drive by the jail and see if there's anybody in there he knew that might make a good broomcorn Johnny. And then Mom worked at the grocery store, and these guys would come in and buy cologne. The town was dry, and they'd buy cologne to drink and just putrid stuff. But a lot of them were farmers from Missouri and eastern Oklahoma would come as well. And girls, this is a, you want to look at it, this is a finished broom.
Thank you. Yeah.
This is what it looks like
I'm doing anything, Paul?
when it's all done. It's all bunched together, wired really tight. And see, this is drier. This has to dry down, but this is, they've cut it off right there, and they've taken all the seeds off, and you see all the little deals where the seeds had attached.
That's cool.
So that's what they were doing to make this broom.
What tool do they use to take off all
I'll show you. We're going to go right over there when we're done on the other side of the tracks, and there's a lot of equipment.
Oh, okay.
See how heavy that is?
It's really heavy, yeah.
See, there's a big difference between this one. This is cane, just Bradlow wild cane, and this is broomcorn.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will try to pass this off as broomcorn, but it's not. It's just cane, right, Art?
Yeah. Now that's what they didn't want in their broomcorn. See, there's a center stem right there. They sure didn't want that.
And there's
It should all come from down there at the base right there, and just be. Here's some of that. I don't know what caused it to grow center stems.
Well, they just put cane seed in there with it. It's not pure.
Well, it might be.
Yeah, because Freddie Randolph ordered a bunch one year, and almost all of it was. If somebody that didn't know, they might think that's broomcorn.
Yeah.
But if you know what broomcorn is, you know this isn't.
It ain't gonna make much of a broom.
Well, that center stem ruins it.
Yeah.
Like Art's saying, that's a stiff-o center stem, all the way clear out to the end. You can see the center. So that's like a Milo head, and this is broomcorn. Isn't that a weird little plant?
Yeah.
And when it's growing, you can't tell the difference between regular corn. You know, when it's just 4 or 5 feet tall, and there's no ear coming out, and all of a sudden this thing pushes out.
Yeah.
I don't even know the origin. Do you know the origin of broomcorn, where it came?
You know, I don't know that I've ever heard. That's something we ought to probably look into. But,
Kent Brooks on the Baca County History.org site, he's got like 10 or 12 articles about broomcorn and how several people in Baca County tried to design a machine that could do the work without all the human labor. That's why it died here in America.
Yeah.
Human labor got too expensive.
Yeah, he's got a lot of patent stuff.
well,
Yeah.
everybody's got vacuum cleaners, and they own a broom that ain't got broomcorn in it.
Yeah, a synthetic broom. But
Synthetic broom.
seriously, these worked as good as anything. But if you use them very long, you know, I've seen brooms where they're clear down to here and they're off at an angle and they're still using them.
And the instructions say every now and then just wet this in and it will last a lot longer.
Oh, dampen it.
Dampen it,
Interesting.
just every now and then dampen it, let it dry, and then go to sweeping again.
Where'd you get this one at?
I bought it at an auction years ago, and they just put it up like that to save it for something
Interesting.
like this someday.
Well,
It was price tag was on someplace. Who bought it? I don't know.
$3.97 or down. Yeah. Art, there were a lot of people that some farmers ended up kind of making their own brooms, didn't they? There were guys that had just their own little broom factory. I see that in the county history book.
Jink Stevenson, Clarence's dad, had a broom factory over at Pritchett for a while.
And then Thomas Monahan had one at Walsh.
Yeah.
And Walter Doak told me that his grandpa Birchfield had brooms made, and then he'd give them away when he was the state representative.
Oh,
up in
really?
Denver, yeah.
You know,
To sweep out those darn politicians.
Yeah.
How much broomcorn would that take?
Oh, this is probably, what, Art, this is probably 3 heads of broomcorn? Make that broom, or 4?
Yeah, imagine.
because they double layered it. They got an inside layer and an outside, so maybe 6, 8.
Yeah, if you look at that, yeah, it's going to take quite a few.
They put an inside layer and a double layer, Yeah, but roughly.
Yeah.
And that's just good.
Well, gosh, I'm glad you brought that.
I thought about that when Kit called, and I thought it'd be neat to see.
Yeah,
Finished project, so.
that's cool.
Now then on some of that dwarf broomcorn, they never cut it, they pulled it.
Oh yeah, you just pull. Yeah, that's right.
Grab that top leaf and pull that head out.
Yeah, you could just. Yeah, you could. I doubt that we can do it to any of these.
I don't
They
suppose.
just grab this. They grab this.
Flag leaf.
Pulled on it. See, this and broke, but it would just come off right then.
Yeah.
It'd just snap off,
So yeah, 'cause it's real dry.
and that was really easy. That was faster even.
Yeah, and I
Of course,
remember him talking about pulling it.
So the saddle was like this. You would build. So when you got your arm full, you would stop and break over. You'd grab about some of these, and man, these are going to be tough. You'd break all those cut. You'd break these over like this, and then you'd break some of the next ones over like this. They were much closer to the ground.
yeah.
You took your broomcorn and laid it. You laid it in the saddle like this, so it was up off the ground. It'd have to be much lower. I should have made it lower. And you'd lay your broomcorn in there, and everybody that cut these 2 rows would come gather it and walk back and lay it in the saddle. And then you just had all these saddles, and you had to keep them about 4 rows apart. So this row wouldn't have a saddle on it, this row wouldn't have a saddle on it, and this row would. And then that gave you room to come down with a tractor and a broomcorn sled. And then you had to pick those up and position them in the, if you just all stacked them this way, pretty soon they'd be sliding off. So you had to stack some this way, fill in the middle, and then you made a big rick. It's long. Some of them could be 30 feet long, 40 feet long. And the trailer was wooden on the bottom, and then it had 2 pipes and a frame that just sat on it. They just sat on it. And you laid all that, and you got all that full. I got in on a ton of that. Mice, snakes, and you laid that all on the trailer, got it all positioned, and then you pulled it, and that's what I blew the tractor tire out with the runner on there. And then you pulled it over to a spot, and you lined them all up in a row, and you tied down, staked, if I remember right, you staked those pipes so that they stayed there. Then you could pull the bottom sled, the wooden sled out from underneath it, and then when you got all that out, you unstaked the pipe and then just pulled the pipe out. So you didn't have to unload that trailer. And then you ricked all that up, and then when you had time, you brought in a seeder and a baler, and everybody broke down those ricks. It took a lot of guys. We saw that film yesterday where they were positioning the broomcorn on the table, and it just fed down into a seeder that ripped all these seeds off. And then when they got it all clean, then a guy picked it up and handed it to a guy in the baler, and he stacked them just right in the baler. And then they used to be horse drawn, and a horse would squeeze down that baler, and then they had broomcorn wire with one end already twisted, number 9 wires, but we called it broomcorn wire. And it'd have a loop on the end, all twisted tight, and you put it through and run it back around and run it in there and pull it over and tight. So you wired them all by hand. They were all by hand, weren't they?
Oh yeah.
I never saw one that was automated. So tons of labor. And then you sold that bale to Johnny Morrison or Don Williams. Don didn't make it?
No, he wasn't back from Amarillo.
Okay.
I went and looked last
Johnny
night.
Morrison or a broomcorn buyer would come by, or else I'd help. I remember helping Dad. Those bales were too much for one man to handle. They were like, what, 300, 350 pounds?
350, 300 to 350 most.
That's some of the bells there.
Oh, yes. Is that here in Springfield?
Yeah, it's just right
You guys
over there.
wanna
It
cut
goes
some?
2 rounds off.
Oh, cool, cool.
Anyway,
Those
You
are,
ain't getting out of here without cutting one ear.
and I helped Dad,
that's
when I was little, I'd help
That's
Dad pull those into the pickup,
40s.
and we'd haul them to town.
Go on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
It took about
Oh, wow.
25 men to seed
Yeah.
run that cedar? At
Ce-
least 25.
Yeah. Cedars took a lot of guys to run that. Just because you had to keep it spread out and keep it coming on that long table.
Yeah. Because it went by and they pressed it in them teeth on that chain.
Oh, they had, it was in, so it was actually, see, I didn't know this. Seriously, I'm a little too young, but I remember watching. So they had a chain and you pressed this into the teeth on the chain.
They was laying on that table, and you kept working it through and working this back so that everything hit the board, the backboard, and then it got over to where that chain was running, and it had teeth on it, and you pressed them down in there so that this wouldn't pull out when that cedar wheel hit
It was
it.
pulling on it.
Yeah. And
You remember that? Did you ever
I
get
never
into-
see much of that.
The Humpsters did, I'm sure there was.
Well, we did. Grandpa had a little.
But out there, out
South. I got a picture of him and his car of the field that he had, someplace else.
so he probably just he had the field, but he hired it
He
then.
hired it.
Now you were one of those rich plantation kids.
We were wealthy to the Depression.
Good.
No.
There you go. Now you cut broom corn.
Yeah, and then some, and it took so many men that sometimes the crew just went from farm to farm to farm and did it.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And then Donovan's had their own
That means
crew,
I
and
gotta
then
cut
they
the
could
rest
hire
of
out. They'd hire out and come in and cut it, and then seed it, and so they did the whole package. But what would make broom corn? What about the stem would say? I'd take it in, and they'd say, "Oh, that's not very good broom corn." What would be wrong with it for Morrison and them to really dock you on the price? What would be wrong? He's laughing. what?
to make an extra $1.
Oh,
Probably just greed.
there's nothing wrong with it, was there? If there was a little mold in
Oh
here,
yeah,
they'd dock
anything,
you.
anything they could find that didn't look quite right, but they sure didn't want them center stems. And a lot of them, if it did go through the cedar, a lot of them center stems, that cylinder with the teeth on it would pull them out,
And then take part of the head
and
with
they'd
it.
blow out,
How would that?
go in the seed pile.
They wouldn't want that.
They wouldn't want that. Yep. There's
And then
the
there's-
center stem right here
Years,
that's showing up pretty good.
Yeah.
The seed color's right, but it has that.
Yeah.
Would this be cane then still, or?
yeah, that's some form. It's not it's a mutation of
Yeah.
an actual broom corn.
I imagine those are just stuff that.
And when they're done, there's tons of seed. There's a pile of seed. And back when I come home from college in '77, I moved into an old house, Roscoe Bryan's house over there, 8 bedrooms, a big old mansion. And I was batching by myself, and he had like 70 peacocks. And I took a tandem truck over and scooped that entire pile of seed into that tandem truck from the ground. It was real light, and took it back and just poured it out for the peacocks to eat all winter because nobody wanted the seed.
Well, and I remember Grandpa fed the broom corn seed to his calves.
Some people did. It wasn't the best seed. It was only weighed like 33 pounds to the bushel or something. It was real light. Do you remember?
I don't remember what it weighed,
Yeah, it was real light
but
seed.
I know,
It's not like a Milo seed.
No.
birds really like that seed. And
Well, you know, Jeremy Lashley's got some over here on the corner, and I looked at it this morning. The seeds, it's already gone.
The birds have taken it.
Yep. And
Go
he
ahead.
planted his before mine. So.
Go ahead, Art. What were you saying about birds and?
Sid Harrison had that out there, and he usually a seed pile close to the road, and you go by and that'd be covered with pheasants. And you know, after they quit raising it, we don't have a pheasant no more.
We don't have enough.
So we need to go back to raising broom corn and get pheasants back.
Maybe so.
Well, it was a, you know, that in the Wallace, there's pictures of them having a parade, and they'd have a broomcorn queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Every
Otis Bonner was the
Oh, yeah,
queen.
yeah, in
Otis
that
Bonner's
picture.
mother was the queen one time. Yeah, Hazel.
Midley, she was a Midley. I
Yep,
think.
she was. Yep. Dick's sister.
Oh, Jake's daughter.
Yep.
Did you ever know Jake?
I did never know Jake.
Oh gosh, Donovan's have a hilarious story on them. You know, they looked like they were really poor. They lived in an old rock shack kind of, and Donovan's Dennis said they walked up from Liberal, and they had, and then those days you could just stop wherever you were and spend the night, and people would feed you, and then you paid them something. So they had this ploy. They were going to kind of rook everybody. They just had a $100 bill. So they'd stop every night when they were walking up from Liberal and whip out the $100 bill, and people would go, well, I don't have change for that. And they'd go, you just have to go. It's all on us then. Well, they stopped at the Midleys where they thought for sure it'd be free, and they whipped out that $100 bill, and Mrs. Midley went back in the back room and got her can out from underneath the mattress and came back and made change, and they had to pay for every meal after that. That's a pretty good story.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and they were all of Baca County must have been. I don't remember. Do you remember much being grown in Stanton and Morton County? Did the counties across Kansas, did they get into broomcorn?
I don't know. Back then, we didn't go nowhere. We didn't run to Pueblo every week or two.
Yeah. Well, I'm right on the state line, and I have no memory of broomcorn being raised past that state line. There were no round tops to collect broomcorn like it was all. It's like a Baca County phenomenon.
Yeah,
I think it had to have something to do with the sandy grounds. All I can figure, because
it didn't do good in tight land.
No.
How much did you know a guy named Tom Cummings?
No.
He used to harvest broomcorn at Pritchett. He lives in Pueblo now. He's kind of a historian. And I didn't realize there was so much broomcorn in the Pritchett area. I knew it was down in Campo and south of us. North of us, the land got tighter and there wasn't near as much broomcorn.
Yeah, we had Glenn Harrison east of us and Sid right north of us.
Oh,
They was raised in your...
Yes, I was going to say Sid Harrison was raised 2 miles south of me.
Would that be a good
Dad knew Sid really well. Every time we come to town, bumped into Sid. Dad and him would visit up a storm. But he lived on Raleigh Fleming's place, which is right south of Max Woolley. So it's almost 2 miles if you flew by a crow. We had to drive around. But yeah, he grew right there up there.
I knew they grew up around.
And then they moved out by you?
Yeah.
He moved out in God's country then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Sid rented that land north of me from Roy Eckleberry. And Glenn bought that place east of us from Rogers down in Campo.
Huh.
So we was right between all of the trash, walked by our place trying to get back to town or whatever.
There was a lot of walking in those. I remember we had our whole garage. We'd have army beds, and we put them up in the cellar in the wintertime. We'd bring them out, and there was a certain smell mixed with Prince Albert tobacco and sweat and those old army blankets, tons of old army blankets. There was a certain, it wasn't a stink, but when you walked into that garage, it smelled like broomcorn Johnnies, because it was a mix of broomcorn, the smell of broomcorn, the smell of Prince Albert, the smell of sweat, the smell of those old army blankets, all mixed in that garage, and it was idyllic for me. We had broomcorn Johnnies at one time. I was in second grade, and we had a project. We had to make something, and the broomcorn Johnny stayed up half the night helping me make this tent.
Yeah, and I've heard this story more than once about them whittling stuff and just making stuff, tying out of nothing, just
playing in hours of playing. If it started raining, that's the worst thing for the broomcorn owner. He had to put them up and keep them in the garage and feed them.
Yeah.
And if it started raining, and then it was hard on the broomcorn, that was like the worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Whenever it would start raining. Dad always said the best moment in his life was when broomcorn harvest was over. He was on a drill, and he had $500 in the bank, and nobody wanted it. And it just sat on that tractor and just drill and had no other worries. Didn't have to worry about working men or feeding them or doing any of that.
My dad always told me, he said, he says, you've had a pretty good year. After the first year, you can pay your taxes and you don't have to borrow money to pay your income taxes.
Right.
He said, there may not be anything left, but he said, you've had a dang good year. So.
Cool. Yeah, I should have done that saddle better. Let me cut some more and I'll try to make a really good saddle. A really good saddle.
These are, gooder fertilized that too much. The stalks are too big.
He was too good. He was too good to it.
You need little stalks.
Well, I put 2 pickup loads of goat manure on my
Oh
garden
my gosh.
every single year, and it hadn't bit me yet. So.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't do that much chicken manure.
Oh, yeah,
you'd have feathers growing up.
Bob Humphrey run a crew of
Senior.
cedars and balers. What was the Dewey Waite? She cooked, didn't she? Wasn't she the one that cooked?
You know, I don't remember,
Dewey
Judy.
Waite's wife.
A lot of teenage girls hired on if they after school or before to help women cook, and it was a hard task. One time Dad hired some boys from Missouri. He saw them on the street and he hired them and brought them to the house. And when it got mealtime, one of them took the potatoes, one of them took the bread, one of them took the meat, and they just ate it all. While the other Broomcorn Johnnies just looked at them. And this went on, and Dad was a real tender spirit. He didn't like to call people out. This went on for 3 or 4 meals, and the Broomcorn Johnnies come to Dad and said, "You're going to have to get rid of those guys or we're leaving." So Dad hauled them back to town, and when he went to town Saturday night to get supplies and find some more Broomcorn Johnnies, there were those same brothers. I think there was 3 or 4 of them, and they had a loaf of bread and they were standing on the street just eating out of that loaf of bread. It's like they didn't know how to mix their food.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I think I've got enough cut to make a really good saddle. But your stock, like he said, your stocks are really strong. So we need to break them over really low.
Tempting.
No, I got it. Need to break them really low.
Not me. Somebody that deserves it.
Let me cut that for like 2 or 3.
Oh, yeah.
That's all right. I just grabbed
But
one.
you need to be a
So then we,
little bit.
so we bend that saddle over, and then we take these.
It's not on the
We take these. That's not a great saddle. And then we'll take all that and set it in there, and you can take a picture of. Is that what you called it, a saddle?
Yeah.
Then you laid it like that to keep, so if it did rain, all this would be out of the water and the mud. And then it also, you didn't want to get it too terrible thick, because if it was a little bit green and you let it dry, this is like shock and feed for the Broomcorn. So that's called a saddle.
And that's what Gary McCall was telling me the other day. Lily's my cousin.
Okay.
And Gary said that the last time he raised broomcorn was in '65, and he said had great broomcorn, but it rained that fall too. And
65 was a terribly wet year.
he said him and several Mexican boys had a heck of a time getting it all picked up. And he said, I decided after that I wasn't ever raising any more broomcorn.
If these heads got in the ground and it rained very much, they'd stick, and then it'd get moldy inside there. It was a nightmare. So you had to let it stay there long enough to dry really good, but then once it was dry, you needed to get it out of there. And your rick, the way you formed your rick, it was mounded, and everything was set in there so that the water shed off the top of the rick.
Yeah.
And then up in the valley, we used to stack hay whenever I was a little kid with the farm hand, and that's the way you'd stack the hay around it so the water would run off.
Gosh, I'm glad you did this. Part of our heritage that's missed. Yeah, if these girls would have been alive 60 years ago, one of you could have been Broomcorn Queen. What an honor to be Broomcorn Queen. The future was yours after that. I mean, the world was wide open
now
to you.
it's all downhill.
Then after that all dries up and everything cut yours out and you start in with the cedar, that stuff, it's got something on it to make you itch.
Like maize.
Like Milo, yeah.
Well, the worst thing I've ever cut's been oats.
And
There's a dust comes off of it that gets on you.
And but you better not reach up and that there, because that just makes it worse. If you can stand it without ever touching yourself, but boy, it'll just drive you nuts. That stuff's got that itch in it.
You see old timers, they have their top button buttoned, they have a string around they have a string tied around their pant leg, and they have their sleeves all rolled down tight because they don't want any of that to get in on them.
As a matter of fact, you know, the deal up at the courthouse that Bill made, the Broomcorn Johnny cutting, you know, he's got his collar.
Yeah. Well, a lot of guys a lot of old timers wore their collars buttoned, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was just part of the deal.
Yeah.
And that kept dirt, because you only took a bath once a week.
Yeah.
You washed up with a washcloth, but you only took a bath once a week, and you didn't want to get too dirty, or it's hard to get clean and get that itch off of it. Max Woolley always told me, do you know Max?
No, I don't.
He's an on-rail guy, and he always told Jan, I married a girl from the city, you know, Chicago, and he said, for your chivalry, I'm saving a mason jar of maize itch. I'm going to pour it on your bed. And my wife, he never did it, thank goodness, but my wife was leery of him for 20 years. I don't know if I trust over him. So, well, gosh, this was fun. Can I give you a hug?
You bet.
It was so good to see you again. Oh my gosh, Art. This is a year of seeing Art. It's really good. It's really good to see you. And really good to meet you, Kirk.
Good to see you, Steve.
Yes, really good to meet you. Really good. Now this isn't like any cedars I've seen. These are really old things.
So this is the cedar?
The cedar. Yeah, you'd have a long... I'm really not the expert on this because this was all happened when I was young, but there'd be a long table. They'd come along and they'd be laying all this out, pushing these up against a flat bar, and there'd be maybe 25 guys strung out, picking broomcorn off the rick that we talked about, and they'd be laying, and this table may run all the way back to the end of this equipment, and they'd be stacking, and it had a conveyor belt on it, or else they'd just push it down, but they'd get it up in there, and then teeth grabbed this on a chain, and then it slid by here, and this thing would be spinning really fast, and it would just jerk the seeds off. This is not they were a lot more complicated than this. This seems like a really, see how many more teeth are on that one? Yeah. It's kind of a rudimentary one. The newer modern ones did it better than that. And so then it would, once it was all seeded, they'd gather it up and haul it over to a guy here. And there'd be a guy standing on a platform, and he'd hand it to a guy at the top. This is a really old one. It's horse drawn. It was horse powered. And the guy would be standing in there stacking all these different ways. And he'd just keep stacking until they got up there. And then the horse, this compressed from the bottom. You see how this pulled up? And it would squeeze the bale, and then you'd run wires through it and run them back, I don't know, either through these things or up here at the top. Yeah, right here. Right here is where the wires would come out in between those boards. And I'm not sure exactly how all that worked. Yeah, and you'd connect those wires. That other side opens up, and then that would squeeze it into about a 300-pound bale, square bale. Not like our bales are a little oblong, these would be perfectly square. And then they'd roll that out, and then the broomcorn buyer would come by and buy it, and they'd either send a truck in, and he probably stored them in that building. This guy here, Johnny Morrison, bought broomcorn all over Baca County. He was a really pretty famous buyer. So there's a lot more to it, but this is all we have here are these two pieces, an old cedar and a really old horse-drawn baler, and that's it. Thank you.